Anne here, and this is More Than a Love Interest, the show where we talk about the arcs of female characters in film. Today we are talking about my favorite Disney princess, because I am tired of hearing about what bad lessons she teaches children. Strap in, because we are going to talk about why this movie started the Disney Renaissance and deserves your respect. First, let's talk about what sets Ariel apart from the previous princesses: her level of agency. Snow White had very little. She convinced the dwarfs to let her stay, but she ran away from the castle originally because the huntsman told her to, and she ate the apple because the evil queen told her to. Her story was about escaping the machinations of others, as was Cinderella's. Cinderella may have chosen to go to the ball, but the fairy godmother got her there, and the prince got her out of her stepmother's clutches. Most of the plot was not under their control. And Aurora, well, you can watch my whole episode on her, but suffice it to say that she certainly is no competition in the agency department. But Ariel chooses her fate several times over. She is also unique among Disney princesses for fully choosing to make a pretty significant mistake. Aurora doesn't know that touching the spindle will do anything. Snow White doesn't know the apple is poisoned. Cinderella doesn't know the prince will come for her if she drops her shoe. Ariel knows the consequences of dealing with Ursula. When Flotsam and Jetsam come to proposition her, she initially turns them away, because she does know who Ursula is, and that she's bad news.
Why, that's... I couldn't possibly. No! Get out of here! Leave me alone!
That making a deal with her would be a desperate act. But then she calls them back.
Wait!
Deciding that she is desperate enough, that she is upset enough at her father to risk burning any and all bridges, to give up whatever she has to, so she can get what she wants most. So Ariel is the first princess, and one of the few, who changes the course of her future through her own actions, instead of it being the direction of someone else. Of course, you can point out that Ursula was clearly baiting her.
She may be the key to Triton's undoing.
But Ariel makes a choice to take the bait.
The only way to get what you want is to become a human yourself.
Can you do that?
This is different from our previous princesses, who just try to escape the malevolent intents of their antagonists. Ariel bargains with hers.
Your voice.
My voice?
Second, Ariel is generally much more fleshed out than her predecessors. Cinderella may come close, but the others do not. In the first scene with Ariel, we find out she is reckless and courageous and infinitely curious about the world around her, or above her.
Have you ever seen anything so wonderful in your entire life? Wow, cool!
We also learn she is prone to absent-mindedness when she is focused on something else.
Music!
It's stuff!
Oh, the concert!
This is already far more than we know about any of the other three princesses. Part of this is because Ariel actually has a relationship and a rapport with her sidekicks, something the previous ones did not. Snow White spoke to the animals, but only en masse, and sort of had a rapport with the dwarves, but not in a way that developed her as a character. Cinderella's mice did more work narratively to flesh out their princess, but only to show her kindness to others. There was little else in their relationship, and most of their screen time is without her. Aurora's sidekicks would, I suppose, be the fairies, and they were pretty prominent, but their interactions with Aurora herself were mostly bland and did nothing to develop either party. But Flounder being Ariel's companion in the opening scene is part of why we learn so much about her. Giving her someone to play off of makes a huge difference, instead of just being comic relief who gets into shenanigans for the entertainment of the kids watching. Sebastian does have this in his scene with the chef, but the rest of his scenes are very focused on Ariel.
Her name is Ariel.
Either talking to her directly, in a way that helps us learn more about her wants and needs, or talking to someone else about her wants and needs. Flounder and Scuttle are not really in any scenes without her, and while both of them adore Ariel, they don't do it because she is a perfectly flawless princess worthy of adoration. Flounder comes to her defense because she is his friend,
But it wasn't her fault!
who may have saved his life but also put him in danger in the first place. He gets her the best present she could ask for because he knows her as a person, and so do we. Scuttle helps her because he likes her curiosity and her trust in him, which he would hate to betray. In contrast, Sebastian's first spoken sentiments are to gripe about Ariel not coming to practice. Then he is assigned as her chaperone, essentially, a job he does not wish to have.
Teenagers. They think they know everything.
But through it, he also gets to know her better and ends up willing to do anything for her, but in a much more believable way than, for example, the dwarves in Snow White. We see how he understands her better as the story progresses and grows to love her as a result, not because she is beautiful or kind, but because of who she is as a person. Eric grows to love her for the same reason. He is far more of a character than his predecessors as well, and has much more agency. This helps with making the love story more believable. Though they do fall in love at first sight, Eric has the time to get to know her, and really fall for her before realizing she is the same woman with whom he was smitten.
One warm and caring, and right before your eyes.
So Ariel's supporting cast is centered around her in a way that the previous movies didn't really do. It makes for a more cohesive story with more personal stakes. You may relate to Cinderella because she is trapped in her circumstances, but The Little Mermaid takes this idea and puts the reins fully in Ariel's hands, and allows her to make mistakes and overcome them instead of just magicking her problems away. That's why her story resonated with me as a child and continues to do so now. Alright, for our next section, let's talk about Ariel's character arc. It is a little different from our usual discussions because the main villain, Ursula, is not actually Ariel's antagonist. King Triton is. For most of the film, Triton gets in the way of what Ariel wants, but he goes through his own character arc that leads to him helping her and giving her what she really needs at the end. So Ariel doesn't change much in this coming-of-age tale, but Triton does, and her final reconciliation is with her father.
I love you, Daddy.
So while she does go through Maureen Murdock's heroine's journey perfectly, it looks a little different. Let's get into it. The first step of the journey is the separation from the feminine. For our purposes, the feminine for Ariel is her deepest desire to live on the surface. So we start with her yearning to be up there,
Where the people are.
in her very first scene, and that is what she is separated from. In essence, she is separated from herself, because she has to hide what is most important to her from so many people. Her story is resolved when she finally gets to embrace all facets of herself. The second step is gaining masculine allies, who would most literally be Flounder, but also Scuttle and Sebastian. They are all her sea friends, who help her learn about the surface and help her keep her secrets from her father,
Tell my father. You're good at that.
for the most part. As mentioned before, they are different from the allies of previous princesses in that they have larger roles and help flesh out their princess. Scuttle reveals Ariel's good traits, her compassion, and her curiosity. As her closest friend, Flounder's scenes show her as a more flawed character, who makes mistakes and gets them into, and out of, various scrapes. Sebastian is the most revealing, as he serves as a kind of proxy for her father. Going through the same arc, but more rapidly, he learns that what Ariel really needs is to be heard,
But if you would just listen.
Not another word!
and that just lecturing her does not help the situation. This parallels what Triton could learn from her if he were willing to listen. The third step is the road of trials. Ariel kind of goes through this again later when she is on the surface, but the first time is just her life under the sea. It is a trial because it isn't what she really wants, and almost no one is hearing what she needs. So she gets in trouble for missing the concert, she gets in trouble for going to the surface, she has to hide her collection, and she has to be lectured about having it. Which is still a trial for her, even if it is a delightful musical number.
You dream about going up there, but that is a big mistake.
But it just reinforces how few people are interested in her actually defending why she loves the surface world and wants to be there. Her song explicitly mentions how she hopes the humans don't reprimand their daughters, referencing how often she is reprimanded instead of being allowed to explain herself. Ariel's illusion of success is fairly brief, and I think that is partly because it is intercut with Sebastian going to face the music with Triton.
Yes, Your Majesty.
So we, the audience, are very aware that the success is an illusion, even while Ariel is not. But the success for Ariel starts with saving Eric from drowning and ends with Flounder's present of the statue. They are a taste of what she really wants, of that surface life, but in a more concrete way. Instead of wanting to get to know humankind in a general, abstract fashion, she now has a very specific one she wants to learn more about. And his reaction to her, being very different from what her father or Sebastian would have her believe, reaffirms her ideas about the surface being where she could belong. So she has a few scenes of unfettered excitement that strengthens her resolve to join the human world somehow. The fifth step is when the heroine experiences spiritual aridity. Ariel gets to her lowest point when her father comes in to find her collection and her new statue. He destroys everything and won't listen to her at all.
He would have died!
One less human to worry about!
Making this a final straw in how intolerable she finds her life under the sea. As I already mentioned, Ariel is very aware that going to see the sea witch is a deal with the devil, and she goes into it willingly. Look at her face as she swims away from Sebastian. She knows what she's doing is dangerous and likely won't work, but she doesn't care.
I don't care.
Anything is better than staying here. So let's not infantilize her and say she just made a mistake or was tricked. She goes to Ursula because she has already lost everything. She already had no voice in the course of her life.
But if you would just listen.
Not another word!
So what else could really be taken from her? The sixth step is the descent. Ariel swims down into the remains of a leviathan, past the merfolk who have been cursed. So basically, she is entering the gates of hell and is surrounded by the damned. It's pretty hardcore. Anyway, in terms of this being a coming-of-age story with a masculine-feminine dichotomy, Ursula represents the feminine, as well as the potential danger of growing up. We see her being performatively feminine, both here and when she is in disguise as Vanessa. And both times, she is pretty threatening about it. Her song is also, not subtle about something womanhood entails.
And don't underestimate the importance of body language. Ha!
Ariel is searching for independence from her father throughout the film,
I'm 16 years old. I'm not a child.
but she has an idealized version of the surface world as her goal for doing that, at least initially. Then she sees Eric, and now has a specific person to latch onto, but in no more mature a way than she did for humankind in general. She could remain childlike, and he could just be a topic of interest for her. But Ursula makes it clear, both in-universe to Ariel and out-of-universe for the audience, that pursuing a man means that Ariel will have to leave childhood behind and become a woman.
I'll never be with my father or sisters again.
That's right. But you'll have your man.
And if this weren't a Disney movie, that would involve more than just a kiss. So in this step, Ariel leaves her relatively gender-neutral life to make the descent into a hyper-feminine space, and this is her point of no return in growing up. She accepts the responsibility of becoming a woman because it means getting a say in her own life. Urgently yearning to reconnect with the feminine is the seventh step. For Ariel, this is kind of combined with the descent, as what she wants to urgently reconnect with is the surface. And Eric. This yearning is what drives her to Ursula's lair in the first place, and then she is finally turned into a human. Her friends rush her to the surface, and she is getting what she wants at last. So one of the strange things about this structure where her father is her antagonist, while Ursula is really Triton's antagonist, is that Ariel's internal journey is essentially done here. She has gotten exactly what she wanted, and, importantly, there is nothing in the narrative to indicate that she was wrong to want it. How she got it turns out not to have been the best plan, and she realizes that Ursula was tricking her to get her father. But the desire to go to the surface is not one the story feels the need to disillusion Ariel about. So her urgent reconnection with it is a pure moment. The eighth step is healing the split with the feminine. All of the scenes with Eric represent this, as Ariel gets to do what she has always wanted to do. Her life under the sea was a separation from her deepest desires, and now she is fulfilling them. She dances, she strolls down the street, she gets to do the things she never imagined were an option. It's great for her, but this step is not the end of her journey because there is one very important step in the way of her future happiness. One of the most essential steps for Ariel's story to resolve is the 9th, when there must be peace with the masculine, her father. But importantly, she is not called upon to change her ways to do this. Instead, peace is achieved because their separation has changed him. He is now willing to listen to her and understand what she really wants, instead of trying to protect her from her decisions.
How much I'm going to miss her.
She has made peace with him, from her perspective, by escaping the sea. Their relationship can only develop because he is willing to meet her more than halfway. The climax of the movie shows Ariel that making a deal with the devil can mean losing everything. But her trust in Eric is proven well-founded because he is the one who destroys Ursula. Ariel's step of making peace with the masculine also includes the masculine parts of her life making peace with each other. Triton learns he was wrong about humankind because of the lengths Eric is willing to go to for Ariel.
Grim, I lost her once. I'm not gonna lose her again.
So while Ariel herself has little to do besides accept the consequences of her actions in the climax, the men in her life take some pretty important steps for her. And while this could be detracted as her being a damsel in distress, I think that kind of misses the point. It is a coming-of-age story where the heroine resorted to making unholy deals because of a controlling masculine force. And we need to see that she won't be in the same situation again. She has shown her mettle already several times over, and doing it here by killing Ursula would add nothing to the story. What this scene does add is that Eric is a good match for her, which I think is far more important than giving her some kind of girl power moment. The film ends with an integration of the masculine and feminine. Ariel's deepest desire is finally granted because of reconciling with her masculine antagonist. He accepts who she is and what she wants, and that humankind isn't all bad. So Ariel gets her happy ending, living on the surface with the man she loves, but not wholly separated from her family under the sea. Okay, I really like this journey for a few reasons. First, it is fairly unique as a coming-of-age story for girls that includes reconciling with her parents. And a non-villainous parent, especially. Triton is taken to task for how he treated Ariel and suffers more than she does for the choices she was forced into, and so learns an important lesson about actively listening to his child instead of assuming he knows best. And since movies tend to be made about the men in this situation, not the daughter, these kinds of relationships are often reinforcing that the daughter is wrong and that the father feels bad about having to be right all the time. It's pretty rare that he learns the error of his ways without placing any kind of blame on the daughter, so I really love that for a story intended for young girls and their parents.
I love you, Daddy.
That leads us to the next thing, where Ariel is never punished by the narrative for wanting what she wants. Triton punishes her, Sebastian reprimands her, Ursula entraps her, but the ending proves her right. That the surface is where she belongs, and she has been stifled and silenced the whole time she was a mermaid. Now she can finally be happy and have a good relationship with her father. I know I made a big deal about how Ariel is allowed to make a mistake, fully aware of it and willing to do so, and I think it's very important that the story doesn't even frame the consequences of this as just Ariel's fault. They are as much Triton's and Ursula's as Ariel's. And Ariel, through her relationship with Eric, is the reason the conflict is able to be resolved. So even though Ariel has relatively little to do in the main climax, the pieces are all moved there because of her, and the final result is due to her actions. And not just to something as vague as her influence, like with Snow White, but what she actually has been doing. She is a thoroughly fleshed out character who goes on a journey that is pretty relevant to most young people watching it, and that is why it has continual impact. For our final section, let's talk about the character design, the costumes, and how they add to the story. First, Ariel's story goes through a few tropes that are common in other media. She is a mermaid. She is washed up on shore with minimal clothing. She is literally a fish out of water, fully dependent on a man for guidance. She is there to entrap said man, essentially. Yet, none of these are an excuse for her to be scantily clad. Even when she is basically naked, there's nothing about it to titillate the audience. For contrast, here are some other mermaids in media, and here are some women stranded on beaches, and here are women whose goal is entrapping men. I have a lot of opinions about the born sexy yesterday trope, but I don't need to go into them here because Ariel does not fall into any interpretation of it. She may not know how things work on the surface, but she hardly seems dependent on Eric to get by. He isn't there to help her reach a goal, he is the goal, and that's a pretty different version of the story. So, the first thing I just want to commend the animators and filmmakers on is that they never make Ariel off-putting to little girls. By which I mean there's a big difference between a character being sexualized and just being female. And I'm going to illustrate that using Wonder Woman. Here she is about to disrobe, and it's played as a joke. But not necessarily at her expense. It's more at how uncomfortable everyone gets. Diana is even laughing at them. So girls in the audience are amused by how silly grown-ups are sometimes about clothing. And here in the Justice League, the joke is on Diana because she has boobs, I guess? Maybe some dudes in the audience find that funny, I don't know. But the joke is no more complicated than, ha ha ha, girl! And that is an extreme example of what I mean by off-putting. The girls in the audience can certainly tell the difference between a woman going about her day with some exposed skin and a woman whose skin is exposed to be looked at. So I mean that there is not one moment in this whole movie in which I feel like I am being invited to look at Ariel, but I'm always being invited to empathize with her. And that is impressive considering the situations in which she finds herself, that making her look prettier for the audience would be easy to justify. Avoiding that temptation is important for a kids' movie, of course, but I think it goes a long way to make Ariel an empathetic character for everyone watching, regardless of gender. Alright, finally, let's get to the elephant in the room. Ariel is a princess who spends a lot of the runtime being unable to speak. Clearly, that is a shocking choice for a female character. To literally remove her voice from the story? Does it not teach little girls to be quiet and wait for a man to save them? Well, no, of course not. That's not what happens. Her friends save her from the predicament of having no voice. Eric then steps in after she has spoken and declared her interest, if not explicitly her feelings. But the reason I'm putting this in this section is because look at Ariel. Look at that face. Look how expressive they made her. You can see what she's thinking. She interacts with Grimsby and Eric and Carlotta while voiceless, not to mention her friends from the sea, and none of them mistake her meaning. And we as the audience can see far more subtle things she's communicating, even without having words to say. 70 to 93% of communication is nonverbal anyway, and she is beautifully animated so you know what's going on in her head. You can see her excitement, her confusion, her desire to be kissed, her embarrassment. It's all there. I'll talk more about the voice thing in the next section, but I think it's important to commend the animators on all the work they did to make Ariel a fully fleshed out character without having the benefit of dialogue. So the character design and animation in this movie are fairly meticulous in how they teach us all we need to know about the characters. And the world of this movie is just gorgeous. Sleeping Beauty may have had more picturesque scenes, but doesn't this just make you want to dive into the sea and stay there forever? It's a beautiful film that I think improves on the previous princess movies because it adds to the fantastic atmosphere all of them have by creating a lot of wonderful character moments. It's always a pleasure to watch, and the story elements are reinforced by the animation style. So I think that's another reason that it kicked off the Disney Renaissance. Alright, I have hopefully sold you on why she is the best princess, at least so far. But let's get back to that elephant in the room. If you want to equate her loss of voice with female oppression, fine. Let's explore that. First, let's talk about the fact that the conflict of her story is that people are not listening to her before she loses her voice. The men in her life are dismissive and assume they know what's best for her, while ignoring any input she may have on the subject. So I would say her literally losing the ability to speak is an extension of that, not some kind of commentary. Second, I would just like to point out that she very much does not get the guy because she is currently unable to speak, and she would have won him over instantly if she could talk to him. And finally, she gets a happy ending when she overcomes her lack of a voice and makes both King Triton and Eric understand what she really wants. So this is a pretty uplifting message of female empowerment and finding your voice, if you ask me. Moreover, and this is important, singing is literally Ariel's most established defining trait. Before we even meet her, we hear that she is the best singer.
She has the most beautiful voice.
When Eric meets her, it is the first thing he notices about her.
She was singing. She had the most beautiful voice.
We know, by the time she goes to the Sea Witch, basically 2 things about her. She cares about human stuff and singing. And her dad just destroyed all her human stuff, so her voice is the only thing she has that is important to her, and that's why Ursula takes it. Well, that's one reason. The other is that she knows Eric will recognize her by her voice more than anything else. That he noticed her singing and commented on it, not on Ariel's pretty face or body language. Ursula is not striking a fair bargain here. She is setting up the chips so she will win.
That was a close one. Too close.
And taking Ariel's voice, her most defining trait, is how she goes about doing that. So no, Ariel is not teaching little girls that silence is what is expected of women in society. In point of fact, she teaches us that women often have to overcome being silenced. She has a lot to say in this movie and gets what she wants when she uses her voice to ask for it, and when the men around her are finally willing to listen. I don't think I'm alone here in finding that to be a pretty powerful message for us to have, especially at an early age. So, is Ariel a good role model? Oh, absolutely! Hopefully I got that across with that rant right there. And not to undermine my own point, but I do think she gets at why assigning characters as good role models and bad ones really misses the point of fiction. Ariel basically trades her soul to the devil, but she is still a good role model. Not because little girls watching are going to try to find a witch to sell things to, but because we get to see her make mistakes and how terrible the consequences are, and importantly, how she overcomes them with love and compassion and finally gets what she really wanted when people treat her with the same.
She really does love him, doesn't she?
So, to finish this up, I'd like to recommend a book. I've read many books about mermaids. They're all great, but I'm going to go with the Water series by Cara Dalkey. It has great world building and a pretty fun twist at the end. Thank you for listening to me talk about my favorite Disney princess. We will continue with Disney princesses later on, but next is a series about Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow, in all of her appearances, hopefully before her movie comes out. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all the things so you don't miss it. See you then!